Colombia, 1940s. A land stitched together by mountains and rivers and torn apart by blood. Civil war raged in the countryside. The poor were left to starve, while the powerful fed on the chaos. Henry Loaiza Ceballos was born into this furnace. Hunger was his first teacher, violence his second. His family lived on the edge of survival, scraping for corn, beans, a little meat if fortune smiled. But fortune rarely did. As a boy, he walked barefoot through dirt roads, carrying the weight of a name no one knew. He saw men dragged from their homes and never return. He heard the echo of machetes in the night. In Colombia's forgotten valleys, death was never far. It lived in the trees, it slept in the rivers, it whispered in the wind. Loaiza learned quickly. Kindness was weakness, mercy was death. To survive, you had to be harder than stone, colder than steel. And even as a child, people noticed his silence, his eyes too sharp, his words too few. He watched, he remembered. He never forgave. He did not dream of school or cities or escape. He dreamed of power, the kind of power that meant no one could touch him. The kind that meant when night fell and blades were drawn, the killers would pass by his door. By adolescence, Henry understood what most men never learn. Life is cheap, and fear is currency. He saw the hunger in the eyes of his neighbors. He saw the rage building in his own, and he swore that one day he would never beg again. The world had buried him in shadows, but from the shadows something dangerous began to crawl. A boy was dying, and a scorpion was being born. By the time Henry Loaiza reached his teens, hunger had sharpened into ambition. The boy who once begged for scraps now learned to take, first with words, then with fists, and eventually with steel. The streets of Colombia were his classroom, and survival was the only subject that mattered. He started small, cigarettes stolen off trucks, cheap liquor smuggled into towns. Whatever could be moved, he moved it. He wasn't just hustling for coins, he was building connections. Street vendors, black marketeers, small-time thieves. Each deal taught him who could be trusted, and more importantly, who couldn't. But the streets were merciless. Every peso had blood on it. Every corner had an owner. And when Henry stepped too close to another man's territory, knives came out. He learned the hard way that money meant nothing without muscle. So he gave himself to violence, quickly, brutally, without hesitation. He became a man who didn't flinch. A man who could swing a machete and watch the life leave someone's eyes. People began to whisper his name, not in admiration, but in fear. The skinny hustler had become something else, a weapon, and weapons attract employers. In the shadows of Cali, bigger men were watching. Men who didn't care about street hustlers, but who valued loyalty, silence, and the ability to kill without asking questions. Henry had all three. They tested him with small jobs, collect debts, intimidate rivals, deliver messages written in blood. Henry excelled. He didn't just follow orders, he made statements. When he was sent to warn a family, the family didn't just disappear. The entire neighborhood learned a lesson. It wasn't long before the cartels came calling. The street hustler had proven himself useful, deadly, reliable. He was no longer running scams for scraps. He was running contracts for killers. And in the underworld of Colombia, there was no going back. The scorpion had found his sting. In the criminal world, names are earned, not given. A name is a weapon, a shadow, a warning. And Henry Loaiza would not remain just another hired gun. He would become something far more lethal. It began with betrayal. A crew he trusted stole a shipment. Money and product meant for the cartel. In that world, mistakes weren't forgiven. But instead of striking fast, Henry waited. He studied the traders, followed their movements, memorized their routines. He became the silence behind their doors, the shadow on their road. When the time came, he didn't simply kill them. He made their deaths a spectacle. Their bodies were left broken, twisted, displayed for all to see. It wasn't revenge, it was theater. A message written in blood. Betrayal stings harder than death. That was the first time someone called him El Alacrán, the scorpion. A creature small but merciless, patient but fatal. A predator whose sting could paralyze entire towns. And the name stuck because it fit. From then on, fear traveled ahead of him. When Henry entered a cantina, conversations stopped. When his footsteps echoed through a village, doors locked and curtains closed. He had become more than a man. He was a story people told their children to keep them inside after dark. But the scorpion's sting was more than violence. It was psychological. He learned how to break people without touching them. A threat whispered in the right ear. A rumor spread at the right time. He could poison trust, destroy alliances, and make rivals turn on each other without firing a shot. In a world ruled by bullets and machetes, Henry offered something rarer. Terror as an art form. And the cartel loved him for it. El Alacrán was no longer just a nickname. It was a brand. And Henry Loaiza wore it like armor. By the late 1980s, Colombia's underworld was split between two giants. In the north, Medellin, loud, brutal, led by Pablo Escobar, a man who declared war on the state. In the south, Cali, quieter, sharper, run like a business empire. Where Escobar used bombs, Cali used bribes. Where Medellin shouted, Cali whispered. For Henry Loaiza, the choice was simple. He was a scorpion, and scorpions survive not by size, but by cunning. Cali was the perfect nest. The Rodriguez Orejuela brothers, masters of the cartel, saw in Henry something they valued: ruthlessness combined with control. He wasn't reckless. He didn't crave attention, he craved efficiency. And in their machine, efficiency was worth gold. His first missions under Cali were small. Protect routes, silence snitches, discipline rivals. But Henry turned every task into spectacle. He didn't just remove obstacles, he erased them. Entire villages learned what it meant to cross Cali's interests. Crops burned, bodies vanished, fear spread like wildfire. Soon, he became more than muscle. He was a strategist of violence, a man who understood that terror could be industrialized. While Medellin threw grenades in crowded streets, Henry perfected selective cruelty, killing the right man at the right time, leaving his corpse in the right place. Every sting was calculated. Inside the cartel, his legend grew. Soldiers followed him without question. Politicians bowed their heads when his name was whispered. To the Rodriguez brothers, he was more than an enforcer. He was an insurance policy, a reminder that Cali could be as deadly as Medellin when pushed. Henry had finally found his home. Not as a stray hustler, not as a nameless gun, but as a vital piece of the most powerful cartel in the world. The scorpion had crawled into the machine, and the machine welcomed the sting. In the underworld, money buys silence, drugs buy influence, but violence buys everything. And for Henry Loaiza, violence wasn't just a tool, it was a currency, the purest form of power. As his role inside the Cali Cartel grew, Henry was given control over entire regions, towns, villages, corridors that connected coca fields to international markets. To keep them in line, he unleashed a reign of terror so absolute that people stopped seeing him as a man. He became a storm that passed through the valley, leaving only ashes behind. Bodies stacked in rivers. Entire families slaughtered for suspicion of betrayal. Villages burned as warnings. Each act was not random rage, it was strategy. Fear became policy. The scorpion understood that one corpse could silence a man, but 10 corpses could silence a town. And 100? A whole province would bow. He didn't waste bullets on chaos. He invested them like coins. Every drop of blood paid for obedience. Witnesses spoke of massacres so brutal they seemed medieval. Men bound, women mutilated, children disappeared into the dark. For Henry, there was no line between guilty and innocent. The only crime was disobedience. The only sentence was death. And yet, amid the carnage, order reigned. Trade routes stayed open. Cocaine moved without interruption. Police looked the other way, politicians collected envelopes of cash, and the peasants whispered prayers not to God, but to El Alacrán. By the early 1990s, Henry's reputation was sealed. In Cali, he was not just an enforcer. He was the embodiment of terror, a man who industrialized cruelty until it became routine. Violence had become his language, and entire regions spoke it fluently. In his hands, blood was profit, and terror was business. Trujillo, Valle del Cauca, a land of green hills, fertile soil, and quiet rivers. On the surface, paradise. But beneath it, hell was waiting. When Henry Loaiza arrived, the valley would never be the same. Trujillo was more than territory. It was a crossroads. Whoever controlled it controlled the movement of drugs, weapons, and money. The Cali Cartel wanted order. Henry promised order. What he delivered was a graveyard. From 1988 to 1994, Trujillo became the stage for one of Colombia's darkest massacres. Villagers vanished by the dozens. Peasants were dragged from their homes, accused of working with guerrillas, accused of whispering to the wrong ear. They were tortured with chainsaws, drowned in rivers, buried in shallow pits. The people learned to live with silence. Mothers searching for sons found only bones. Priests who dared to denounce the killings were themselves executed. Entire communities understood that survival meant obedience, and obedience meant worshiping fear. Henry turned violence into ritual. He didn't just kill, he made death a message. Each mutilated body was punctuation. Each mass grave, a paragraph in a story written with blood. The message was simple. This valley belongs to the scorpion. By the time investigators uncovered the scale of the killings, hundreds were gone. Some say more than 300. Others whisper the number was far higher. But numbers don't tell the story. Fear does. The shadow of Trujillo spread across Colombia, a reminder that the Cali Cartel didn't need bombs or chaos. It had Henry Loaiza. For the peasants of the valley, life became a coin toss. For the cartel, it became proof that terror worked. Trujillo was no longer farmland. It was a cemetery. And its caretaker was El Alacrán. Inside the Cali Cartel, alliances were as sharp as knives. Everyone smiled, everyone toasted success, but beneath the surface, betrayal waited. And Henry Loaiza, El Alacrán, had to crawl through this nest of serpents without being swallowed. The Rodriguez-Orejuela brothers ruled with polished suits and quiet handshakes. They built Cali into a business empire, a cartel that preferred contracts over car bombs, bribes over bullets. To the outside world, they looked like gentlemen. But behind them, in the shadows, they kept men like Henry, monsters who reminded rivals what happened when business etiquette failed. To the Rodriguez brothers, Henry was indispensable. He was the hand they didn't want to be seen using, the sting in their tail. But to other commanders inside the cartel, he was a threat. Too ambitious, too feared, too willing to do what even they hesitated to imagine. Tensions simmered. Allies one week became enemies the next. Rival factions within Cali whispered about removing the scorpion before he grew too powerful. But every attempt to sideline him ended the same way, with bodies in the river and silence in the ranks. Yet Henry was no fool. He knew the brothers trusted no one fully. He was a weapon, and weapons are disposable. So he played carefully, loyal in public, ruthless in private, always useful enough to keep alive. He struck his enemies, but never his masters. At the same time, he watched the greater war beyond Cali. Medellin was collapsing under Escobar's arrogance. The government and the DEA hunted him like a rabid dog. While Medellin burned, Cali grew rich, and Henry's shadow grew with it. But the serpent's nest could never stay calm forever. Power invites jealousy, and even a scorpion can be crushed when the snakes decide to strike together. For now, he sat at their table. But every banquet of kings hides poison in the wine. Every empire believes it will last forever. Cali was no different. In the early 1990s, the Rodriguez-Orejuela brothers controlled 80% of the world's cocaine trade. Politicians bowed to them. Police took their money. Cities moved on their rhythm. But cracks always begin small. An arrest here, a leak there. And soon, the cracks spread like fractures through glass. The U.S. turned its full attention to Cali after Medellin fell. Escobar was dead, his empire in ruins. Now, the world's most powerful cartel wore suits and ties. To Washington, that made them even more dangerous. The DEA, the CIA, Colombian intelligence, they all sharpened their knives for Cali. Henry Loaiza watched the storm approach. Raids, interceptions, betrayals. Informants emerged from every corner. Politicians who once counted Cali money began switching sides. The empire that had seemed unshakable was suddenly fragile. And for the first time, the scorpion's sting felt small. He tried to hold ground the only way he knew, through blood. When suspicion rose in Trujillo, more bodies appeared in rivers. When whispers spread inside Cali, rivals vanished overnight. But violence could not silence wiretaps. Torture could not erase evidence. Fear could not stop the machine of the state once it decided to destroy the cartel. In 1995, the Rodriguez brothers were captured. The cartel's leadership shattered. Soldiers deserted. Lieutenants flipped. Fortunes vanished. And Henry, so feared, so untouchable, was left exposed. No machine to protect him, no kings to serve, only enemies circling. For years, he had been the sting in Cali's tail. But a scorpion without a nest is just another insect waiting to be crushed. The empire cracked. And Henry Loaiza learned that terror alone cannot hold back history. The day they found Henry Loaiza, the world seemed almost normal. Birds sang over the valleys, rivers flowed, and the sun rose over Trujillo like nothing had changed. But those who knew the valley understood. The calm was a lie. The scorpion had ruled these hills with terror, and now he would face a different kind of cage. It began quietly. Intelligence leaks, DEA surveillance, Colombian forces coordinating with precision he had never faced. For years, Henry had been untouchable. Ghost in the shadows, shadow in the empire. But ghosts can be trapped when the net is cast wide enough. His arrest was swift. No firefight, no last-minute escape, no legend-building stunt. One moment he was El Alacrán, the man who could move entire towns with a whisper. The next, he was handcuffed, hooded, and lifted into a vehicle that smelled of steel and leather. Inside the cell, silence was total. No whispers, no footsteps. The walls were thick, the doors heavier than any river he had ever crossed. He was no longer in charge. No army answered to him. No money flowed at his command. For the first time, the terror he had wielded could not touch anyone. Henry paced, eyes sharp, mind still calculating, still observing. He studied guards, schedules, routines. Even behind bars, the instinct to dominate did not die. But the world outside moved differently now. Evidence piled up. Testimonies built cases. And slowly, like sand slipping through fingers, the empire he had helped construct began to vanish. He had once made fear a currency. Now he paid the price. The terror of the fields, the massacre in Trujillo, the whispers of entire provinces, all reduced to testimony, files, and chains. The Scorpion, king of shadows, had become a ghost in concrete, and the world outside finally exhaled. Henry Loaiza Ceballos may have been caged, but the shadow he cast stretched far beyond steel bars. The valley of Trujillo, the streets of Cali, the corridors of power, his presence lingered. People whispered his name in fear, respect, and sometimes awe. The Scorpion had vanished from the streets, but his venom remained. Even years after his capture, the Cali Cartel continued to operate. New men rose in the ranks, copying tactics, repeating terror, learning the lessons Henry had taught them. His methods had become blueprints, his cruelty a manual. Where he once walked, footprints of violence had been etched into the land itself. Those who had survived the massacres remembered. Mothers and fathers told stories of disappearing neighbors. Soldiers recalled the precision with which he struck. Politicians counted the cost of crossing him. And everywhere, the lesson was the same. Fear endures. It is stronger than bullets, louder than gunfire, and more persistent than death itself. Henry's legend was not one of redemption or remorse. It was one of inevitability. In Colombia, the world learned that even when the body is gone, the poison spreads. One man, small and deadly, had changed the rules of survival, loyalty, and terror. His enemies fell, his allies obeyed, and the world learned that sometimes the Scorpion outlives its sting. The streets may forget the names of the dead. Governments may celebrate victories, but the Scorpion's imprint is permanent. His venom flows in whispers, in rumors, in nightmares. A generation of criminals and civilians alike grew up under the shadow of his deeds. The body may be gone, the man may be caged, but the sting remains. And in the heart of Colombia, the Scorpion waits.